On air.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Write Once, Read Many. Got an exciting couple of chapters for you folks this week. Action-packed. And I'm glad to be back here on the program with my good friend William here.
Indeed, and I've almost got the link onto the Discord here.
Ooh.
The
There we
most
go.
exciting part of every show.
Yes, posting the links.
Exactly. Alright, and we've got our cool new Arc 6 music playing, which I, forgot to have prepared for the previous two Arc 6 sections, but here we are in the future.
Better late than never.
Yep. And got the speed draw going on. It's
Ooh.
It's pretty spicy. So you can see there's Gru there hanging on to Brutus's tail.
Okay. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, yep. All right, and let's pull up the document. No one is quite in the chat yet, but for the any future listeners, the audience participation reminder is talk about the effect on the chapters of skipping the planning scene and jumping straight into the action of the chapter. So, yes, and it looks really funny half-colored in the image.
Yeah, I mean, this is having that shattered glass effect is going to be different from most of the other drawings she's done before. So, oh yeah, this is looking super neat.
Yeah. 2 plus 4 times 5. Currently driving to work, so I can only listen for a little bit. Well, that's all right. At least you can be here now. And Vale says hi. Unfortunately, I think these may be our only two audience members this week, but so it goes sometimes. And let's get the high
Victoria's not
quality
here
art.
to hear us enjoying her wonderful art.
Vic might show up, but was kind of busy with something. So this morning got kind of interrupted. Mwahaha, we can taunt 2 plus 4 times 5 in chat, says Vandal. Yes, exactly. That's what we do when people aren't here. So yeah, here's the high quality version of the image, and I think it looks great. It's about to be the second crash through, and we'll see what happens in the chapter. So we haven't written down any themes. I'm not sure what's exactly here for themes. I'm sure that there are themes in these chapters.
I think I could probably at least pull one out, and that would be reputation. This is one that's been hit on a few times before in this story, where posturing not for any immediate gain, but for the public perception, is very important for capes.
Yeah.
And we see this more strongly in this chapter than most chapters previously. We got some of it in the Summer's Rock. We get some of it in general, like from Gru's and Tattletale's attitudes, and Bitch too, I suppose. But here especially, we get to see Arms Master really doubling down on that.
Yeah, and I mean, you also get to see there's a small little moment I pulled out where Tattletale gets annoyed that that Gru blocks the crowd from hearing her little spiel after they drop in, because for her the theatrics are really important too, and it's her version of the posturing.
Yeah, Vale has a really good phrasing of this. He just says theater, and yes, that is exactly it.
Yeah, it's a good. I mean, they even kind of talk about it that way later in the story. So, Vale says, "Oh, shit, go on."
And of course, that dovetails very nicely between the needs of the characters and the needs of the writer, because the characters need to be thought of as being intimidating in order to essentially lessen the threats on themselves and have leverage in this world. And Wildbow, as the writer, really likes having this happen because it's just cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Vale says Vic's art desperately needs some thing to be shared on the Parahuman subreddit. I will talk to Vic about that if she's interested in that.
Yeah, it's the kind of
Um
thing where I'd sort of wouldn't want to do it myself, but if she wants to, I'll be happy to give her an upvote.
right. I also was hesitant to go to Reddit because I not that I think that this stream would really blow up, but I didn't want just like all the people to flood into the chat and stuff. I like the little groups that we have. I mean, I wish we could have a little more fleshed out with M and Vic here, but these things happen. Um,
Mm-hmm.
um, but yeah, I just didn't want to ruin the magic of a small audience show. Um, But yeah, unless there's any other themes we want to talk to or talk about. Oh wait, also Vale said there's also the great beat of Emma X Taylor, where Taylor's attitude has changed. She is willing to attack her. I think, kind of. It's like
Sort of. Yeah, she spends a beat actually thinking about how she's not going to consciously give any more effort to attacking Emma, but if it happens, well, you know.
these things happen. Um, yeah. Uh, so I think we can get into 6.5. Do you want to start it or should I?
Sure, I can grab it.
Mm-hmm.
We jump straight into the action, and Brutus, Judas, and Angelica are jumping straight off the roof of a 32-story building with the Undersiders in tow. We get a brief explanation that Tattletale had been able to get the employee access codes for the building and use the elevator to get up here. Looking down, they can see only the headlights and taillights of cars as tiny yellow and red points.
Yeah. Vale says, I feel like the Sistine Chapel was completed and I'm one of the few who have the chance to see it, but everyone could with a sign put up related to art sharing. It is gorgeous. Yeah, I know how you feel. Just I have shown the art to individual people and Vic has gotten all self-consciousy. So,
I, I think that's just common, like,
yeah.
especially if you aren't used to sharing your art. I feel deeply uncomfortable listening to my own voice for certain.
Gotcha.
And unsure of my ability to actually narrate well. Yet here I am, and
Yet here you are.
Victoria is definitely more skilled than I am, so she should get that stuff shared out there.
Yeah, we'll see. She'll probably do it sooner or later, you know.
Mm.
Brutus has Bitch and Gru on his back, Judas has Skitter and Tattletale, and Angelica has Regent. They'll be jumping in that order. Skitter has a moment to contemplate that she could still think of a reason to back out before Bitch's whistle sets the dogs in motion.
Yep. If you're gonna step over the edge of a building, you have that moment of hesitation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know if you've ever done any rock climbing or rappelling,
Oh,
but
I have for sure.
okay, yes. Yeah, there's that moment when you're at the top of something and you have to go backwards over the edge. It always gets me.
Mm-hmm.
Um Anyways, a little quote here. If you happen to have something to hold on to, you cling to that for dear life and you pray, even if you aren't a praying type. My hands clutched hooks of bones on either side of Judas's neck, hard enough that I thought I might break either the bone or my hands. And I wrote here like, speaking of rock climbing, they really should invest in some quality harnesses. Uh, they're pretty expensive, but it is way better than falling off a dog that's moving fast, let alone on top of a skyscraper.
Yeah, you know. Um, the dog hits a patio 3 stories down. Skitter's sure that they're not going to make it when they jump across and is worried that Judas misjudged the jump. Then his claws get onto the patio, and instead of climbing up, he just pushes off. away from the building for a second jump, and they leap out across the street to their real target, the Forsberg Gallery.
Mm. Yeah. And you wrote, I like how this whole initial scene is written. There are a lot of good little details about the cold night and the dog's breath and the low city hum when they're on the roof. The world feels alive as we undertake this ridiculously dangerous action moment. The wind blew through my hair with a painful bite of cold. We'd crossed the event horizon. It was do or die from here on out. That made it eerily easy to cast aside all doubt and hesitation and steel myself for what came next.
Mm.
Yeah, I really
Mm.
think this initial scene, even more than a lot of the fight stuff later on in these chapters, that like standing on top of the building, the wind whistling through uh, your hair and along the dogs, and you leap off and down. No music, just the wind rushing past, boom, across. It feels very dramatic and very cinematic.
Yeah, I think it's a really well drawn scene, and it it's very easy to imagine. So.
Vale, yes, Vale says, I do full body rooftop parkour for a nighttime hobby, and I can say the thrill is really all about jumping across long gaps at great heights, landing on glass ceilings, then attacking heroes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I get you.
That's my main portion, is that attacking heroes bit. Um, Taylor is even judgy of buildings. If I remembered right, it had been designed by architecture students at the university a few years ago. I wasn't really a fan of the design, which resembled the late stages of a game of Jenga. And then Greg had written here, I think it actually sounds neat, but I like big geometric glass and steel stuff generally.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Taylor's very unhappy with this building, but I'm fine with it. Sounds Yeah, it sounds okay.
yeah. I kind of think of like I mean, not that it's exactly similar, but a glass and steel structure that I quite like is the Seattle Downtown Library. It's
Oh
pretty
yeah, and
awesome.
that one's very geometric too. It's got those very sharp angles.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's a weird big geode thing.
yeah. I love that building.
Oh, sorry. I was just typing to look at the way it looked like. I'm like, I haven't seen it in a bit.
No, no
Um,
problem.
the the building is illuminated by different colors depending on the time of day, but it's trailing the sky from earlier. In the blue gray of the evening, the tower was pink and orange, echoing the sunset that had just finished an hour ago. Yeah, that's even a bit of cooler design because you got all that glass to catch the light and sparkle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I really like the. I don't know. There's something about this that just really like catches my imagination quite a bit. Like the idea that it's this odd shape and that it like continues to be. I don't know, like that idea that it's trailing the sunset and that it has those colors and that it slowly fades just like an hour later. That's so cool. Yeah. He always thinks of the best little setting details. Oh, Vale said Taylor is not a huge fan of anything that isn't helping the dock workers union or her and Brian hooking up. Not necessarily in that order. Yeah. Um. Then we get to Brutus slams into the building, cracking its glass. The amount of self-imposed risk they're facing is ridiculous. Gru nearly falls right off the side of the building, as depicted here. Saved only by grabbing Brutus's tail. Judas comes in like a wrecking ball. There was a moment where you could hear the sound of straining metal, followed by the sound of a lot of shattering glass. And then, step aside, Marvel Table in Brockton Base Central Bank. We have a new property damage high score. By a lot.
Oh yeah. Oh gosh. This is a sort of millions of dollars potentially in like property damage you're looking at because they're gonna have to shut everything down, put all the glass back in, clear everything out. Oh, it's a nightmare. Oh goodness.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. Um,
Anyways, we have The two dogs and four capes fall through onto the floor with all the glass in tow. Despite his earlier drop from Brutus's back, Brutus manages to land on his feet. All around us, there were people in fancy dress and uniforms, suits, dresses, costumes.
I feel like that line works on multiple levels. I wasn't quite sure what to write out about it, but it's like, um, uh, even if there were no hero shenanigans, you could say the same line probably about like upper class people, how their clothes are like, how kind of everybody's in costume in this. I don't
Yeah,
know.
how very performative high society events are.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, Vale says, doesn't the loser of Jenga have to clean it up though? Why would the Undersiders care? They won't lose.
Haha!
Um, Angelica arrives on the scene. Regent completely, deliberately, and gracefully falls off her back. She's got the harness they used for the bank robbery on with cardboard boxes instead of sacks attached.
Yeah, most of the Protectorate is here. Armsmaster, Miss Militia, Assault, Battery, Velocity, and Triumph. They're basically just missing good old Dauntless. Along with some of the wards, Clockblocker, Vista, Gallant, and Shadowstalker. And Glory Girl, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it's funny how she's just like hovering there. I mean,
Yeah,
it's like as soon as she knows there's a fight, immediately hovers in the air.
I mean, you're putting it past her to not just hover casually throughout her life. If you can fly, like, you might as well hover every now and then.
Yeah, you gotta hover. Um, there's also a PRT squad. Their very recognizable uniforms were chain mesh, augmented with Kevlar, topped with faceless helmets. The only means you had to identify them were the badge numbers printed across their vests in bold white numbers. Four of the five had what looked like flamethrowers. They're all the way in the front of the room, and you wouldn't normally be would normally be opening fire with non-lethal weaponry, but there are children and elderly in the way. This is yet another factor in how they planned out the fight. In this enclosed room with no time to evacuate the civilians, the Undersiders essentially neutralize one of the three enemy groups right off the bat, and they have a window of opportunity to go further when they co-opt their weapons in a bit.
Yeah, you have to imagine that a lot of this was Tattletale realizing what the setup would be in terms of defenses, and
Yeah,
then everyone being able to plan around this very well. Because they're stationed at the front of the room, sort of where they'd expect people to come in, but the Undersiders have have made their own entrance, shall
an
we say?
alternate route.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, Vale says, this fight just felt so fun. I wish the Undersiders would join up with the villain wing of the PRT to have this sort of thing sanctioned and scheduled forever. Yeah, you gotta have this sort of Ankh-Morpork Thieves Guild sort of arrangement where, you have your scheduled thieveries, and that's just sort of how things are.
Yeah, yeah. It's we should really formalize the cops and robbers game.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Skinner looks over the crowd, recognizing the mayor, some minor actor, and Emma. Ooh, the stakes are high before, but now Taylor knows that she can't mess up. It kind of sucked, knowing I was about to give her an awesome story to share with the rest of the school when her suspension was over with. I was really hoping it wouldn't be a story along the lines of, these idiotic villains just pulled a stunt so dumb it would put Uber and Leet to shame, and got themselves arrested in a matter of seconds. Yeah, with Emma here, she knows it's on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Got to prove herself.
Yeah,
Vale.
that's the most important part of this. Emma.
Yeah. Vale gave us a little known PRT fact. When the villain teams counterfeit the uniform, the serial number 42069 is used over half the time. Um,
Ah, yes, good.
Indeed. Tattletale starts chattering, but is interrupted by Gru actually doing the job. He covers the nearly the entire room with darkness, leaving only the Undersiders and the edges of the room clear. Holy shit! Not doing that again! Fucking intense.
I mean, Yeah, Gru nearly fell to his death a few moments ago. So, yes, definitely.
Yeah, but Tattletale's trying to say that and is sad to be cut off, and so she shoots Gru a dirty look.
Yeah, you mean that's sort of Tattletale's bread and butter. She's not going to be doing any sweet martial arts or anything. Talking is how she fights. So,
Oh, I did forget to pull it out and actually like write it here, but it occurred to me when I was reading these chapters. I think that this chapter is possibly the only time that Tattletale like physically fights.
oh yeah, I mean, sort of. She'll have a foam thrower in just a moment.
Yeah, but that's still in this chapter. I mean, like, I don't think after this chapter, like even in 6.6, that because she's already knocked over or whatever. I think. I'm pretty sure she just like never fights aside from these times. You know, it's kind of
Yeah,
crazy.
she pulls a gun and tries to get a hostage in 6.6, but
Mm.
Arms Master, you know, is Arms Master.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Anyways, yeah, I'm not certain if she fights ever again to any great extent. Like, she typically has a gun, for last measures, but at a certain point, if you're a mastermind, if you have to pull a gun and get in a fight as a mastermind, you've already lost.
Yeah, yeah. Essentially.
Yep. Gru helps get her down from Judas's back and keeps holding her hand as they start moving. Super cute. Gru, Skitter, and Tattletale are headed for the front in the PRT squad. Regent, Bitch, and her dogs are headed the opposite direction. Regent stopping to unhitch the cardboard boxes, which break on impact with the floor, and release the swarm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's pretty good. Taylor even says in her head that it worked better than she expected. And then we get that moment that Vale was talking about. If a few more of the biting and stinging sort headed in Emma's general direction, it wasn't due to a conscious choice on my part. And then Greg put here, sure, Taylor.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm certain you're all above the board, Taylor.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, the bugs everywhere give Skitter a sense of where everything is, despite Gru's darkness. Gru banishes the darkness around a portion of the PRT squad, and Skitter steps in. Drawing my knife against the hose that extended between the flamethrower like device he held in his hands and the tank on his back.
Yeah, yeah. She manages to cut the hose, but not before the PRT trooper notices and elbows Skitter right in the mask. However, with the hose cut, the contents of the tank begin emptying onto the floor. It was a yellow white as it poured onto the ground. It expanded like shaving cream. The tank was probably close to 3 gallons, making for a hell of a lot of foam.
Oh, Taylor, you spilled all the shaving cream.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Oh, and then Vale had said, it was frequent enough that a PRT director engaged with a thinker team to figure out why. He is now known as Director Obvious. He thinks it's a compliment. And then to something we had said, yes, this Emma shift is a huge change. I don't know. I don't know if it's a huge change.
I think it might be an incremental change. It definitely is a move from Taylor actively holding herself back from doing harm to the bullies to being more ambivalent towards it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it definitely is a change. I'm not certain I would say it's a gigantic one quite yet.
It's part of a series of many small changes.
Mm-hmm. Just one step further, Taylor. Just one more. Gru kicks a guy right the fuck into the foam pile and immediately follows up hitting the next guy in the chin to knock him off balance, so he can pull the containment foam sprayer over his head. Then once the guy can barely stand up, he does the same face to the knee trick.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Classic trick. Yet,
Bonk.
yet another PRT dude steps out of the darkness, and Tattletale jumps in and grabs the weapon out of his hands. She's like, doesn't get it right away. She's wrestling with him, but once Skitter jumps in and kicks his legs, then she's able to get the containment foam sprayer and blast him. Gru lets down the darkness from around the last PRT squatty, and Tattletale foams him too. Skitter shows some great teamwork here, some great assists for both Gru and Tattletale. Yeah.
Yeah, they're really gelling together as a team at this point. I mean, they sort of have been for a bit. Their team is one that sort of inherently has synergy, but just having the opportunity to work together more and get more familiar with sort of the tempo of how they fight
Mm-hmm.
is helping them really put this fight together.
For sure, for sure.
Anyways, the shaving cream gunk is containment foam. It's pretty neat stuff. We'll talk about it more in the world building section. The short version is that it's sticky, strong gunk that can be used to temporarily restrain people. And once they relieve PRT troopers of their containment foam throwers, it's time to get foamy.
Yeah, yeah. Vale says in Arc 1, a large part of Taylor's self identity was restraint about dealing with her bullies in any powered way, to even quit the team if anything happens. Now she shifted, it's a big deal. IMO. It's also a 2 beat so far. First beat, she is completely restrained. Now she's ambivalent. Third beat will subvert things, as 3 beats go. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that. I'm just sort of. I just like to sort of wait for the third beat to be like, ah, yes. And now here's the payoff.
Mm, mm.
It is important though to point it out that you make a good point that it is worth pointing it out as these sort of beats occur. It's like, oh, we can see the setup, the reinforce, the payoff is coming. Because if you're reading the work of a competent author, this sort of setup is something that will have an effect in the story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The tank for the containment foam is heavy enough that Skitter just crouches down to let it partially rest on the ground once she's got hers. Gru starts pointing out targets, then clearing the darkness so that the others can aim. Tattletale and Gru aim for Glory Girl. Sorry, I mean Glory Hole and Clockblocker. Skitter takes satisfaction in aiming for Shadow Stalker. Good, good. Let the hate flow through you. You can tell that Greg wrote this part because it got Palpatines.
Yeah, I just realized I put another Palpatine reference later on in chapter 6.6. I think I think it just was in a very Palpatine mood. What can I say?
Yeah, I mean, who wouldn't be?
Unfortunately, Shadowstalker first evades and then doesn't get stuck in the gunk as it hits her. She starts to ready her crossbow, but Skitter and Tattletale work together to absolutely bury her, and Gru covers the whole mess with darkness.
Hmm. And then next target. Skitter hefts the tank off the ground, then moves and sets it down, ready to fire again. This time it's half the Protectorate: Battery, Assault, and Triumph. Skitter swarms a bunch of bugs just before they let down the darkness so that there's more distraction.
Yeah, Assault and Battery are clearly veterans. Battery has been charging up onto the darkness, and once she can see, she blurs into motion. She didn't bolt straight for us, though. Instead, she leaped to one side, kicked Assault square in the middle of the chest with both feet, then careened off in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
Take that, Assault!
Are they fighting? Vale says another little known fact: a tinker in the Midwest tried making escape oil to combat containment foam. While it did make for a fantastic counter to the foam, it also made fighting require fly powers. Fly powers.
Because otherwise, you're slipping all over the place.
Oh, I see. Because you got no friction.
I mean, yeah, that would be if you want to stop a fight on the ground. If you coat everything in a frictionless surface, no one can really reasonably reach each other. So, fight over.
Vale says this is the first fight Skitter is just all out excellent as a villain slash fighter, right? Um,
Yeah, I
I
mean,
guess I feel like she hasn't really had trouble since the Bakuda fight. She really, in my opinion, trounced Lung and Oni Lee in those team fights.
yeah, I was going to point that out as well. The fights against the ABB, Skitter was pretty on point. Um, she definitely has some stumbles here in these early chapters. she's getting a sense of like how her fighting style will be with her power, with her own like body's abilities, being able to meld together with the team well. So there are some points where she sort of stutters in her abilities. And this chapter, as I mentioned earlier, is one where we really get to see her gelling very well with the team. Everything sort of goes off teamwork wise very, very smoothly, with very minimal communication needed to make certain that it all goes well. Um,
Vil
but yeah,
says,
it definitely. Go ahead.
oh, I was going to say, Vil says Skitter v. Lung, she won. This one, she just dominated. I more or less agree with that, I guess, but there are moments where like Triumph hits her several times with shouts and she's like completely thrown off balance and she can hardly stand. Um
Yeah, on the other side, you could say Oni Lee did put a knife right through her mask.
it's
So,
true.
eh,
I think that she still had some struggles in this. She certainly gets injured and Tattletale gets very injured. Which I guess we're only talking about Skitter's performance in the fight, but yeah, she does good. She does real good.
I
Um,
think what we can say is that as a both Skitter and as a team, the Undersiders, relative to the amount of firepower they're against, do exceptionally well this fight.
yeah,
Because they're up against pretty overwhelming odds. Most of the Protectorate, a bunch of wards, Glory Girl. The deck is pretty stacked. PRT squaddies.
mm-hmm. If you count, I'm gonna count just each cape and each PRT is one, and not count the dogs because the dogs are like an extension of Rachel. They're like her power.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so their side is like 5 versus what was the thing up here? Um, we listed them just a short while ago. Where was that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 capes and 5 PRT squad people. So like 16 enemies. Um,
Yeah.
and even if you want to argue that PRT like blah 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 and not capes, it's still like 11 capes and backup versus 5 capes. So
Yeah, and some of the capes on the PRT side are they're pretty good.
they are indeed. Vale says maybe it's progression. Like fight one, she's 20%. This one, she's 75%. If nothing else, she's just turning badass in very reasonable ways. Yeah. I think it's a definite improvement scheme, and um, like they will continue to like do more and more stuff, and really I think it just like it benchmarks over and over again like how far they've come, because we'll see them like lose a fight semi near this time period like in a little while, and then they will fight essentially the same people like 7 arcs later or something and just completely trounce them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is one thing that I really do like about Wildbow's writing is that his characters don't typically have like big leaps in ability. You get to see them. You get to see the process of them developing themselves, both as people and as combatants, or in various other stories, practitioners, and so on, in a very believable and consistent way, and it's really great.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
um Sort of getting back to the thing, Assault can manipulate kinetic energy, so he's able to use the energy from Battery's kick to zing toward the Undersiders, while Battery moves to flank. Gru manages to bog down Assault in foam, but not before he gets body checked into a wall. He's actually launched back to the area where the wards are. It's kind of crazy. Just
Yeah, well, I mean that's sort of what Assault does. He's able to really translate that movement into a really big hit.
mm-hmm. Ye-
Um, Tattletale and Skitter together can't hit Battery, just moving too fast. Skitter manages to push Tattletale out of the way as Battery throws a table their direction, and while they're still reeling from that attack, Battery is already recharging. This is seemingly the main basis for her fighting style. Distract with a big play, then recharge while they're off balance.
Yeah, yeah. Skitter finds herself alone up against Triumph and Battery. She didn't know where Armsmaster, Miss Militia, or Velocity were, but didn't have the resources to search for them in the remaining darkness. Skitter doesn't want to give Battery the opportunity to charge and swarms her, then follows up on the distraction by finally hitting her with some foam before Triumph starts hammering away with sonic shouts.
By this point, Gru has recovered enough to rejoin the fray and opens fire on Triumph, but the hero proves to be a tough customer. Triumph moves around too quickly for Gru to nail with the foam at first, and by the time he's on target, Triumph has a table in hand to block while he keeps shouting at Skitter, and she loses balance. Gru sees an opportunity to call in reinforcements, and Brutus enthusiastically rams into Triumph.
Skitter's concerned that Triumph may have been hit a bit too hard, but is quickly distracted by dumping more foam on Shadowstalker. She was slowly climbing out of the pile she was stuck in, which isn't normally possible, but her powers let her make slow progress. And then whenever that happens, you just pile more foam on.
Yeah, one thing I'll note, Triumph is completely out of the fight from this hit. We never see him again in these chapters. So Taylor may have a point here that they hit him pretty hard.
Yeah, it's true. But
Yeah.
he's a toughie.
Yeah, he'll be back up later. This cathartic sequence is broken up as bad news arrives on the scene. Skitter! Gru roared. Move! I didn't waste any time in throwing myself to the ground. Out of the corner of my eye, I only saw a blur of blue and silver where I'd been standing. I had to flop over onto my back to see Armsmaster standing 6 feet away from me, leveling the blade of the halberd in my direction. The silver of his visor made precious little of his expression visible. All I could see was the thin, hard line of his mouth.
Yeah, he quickly disables their foam throwers with stylishly aimed EMPs. He's flipping that stick around like it's nothing. Things go from bad to worse very quickly. Armsmaster yells to Bitch to call off her dogs, saying that he didn't want to hurt them. Gru actually agrees and yells for her to call them off. She whistles and Brutus runs back to join her. Gru says, "You were moving like you could see in my darkness."
And I'll take this last little quote here. I've studied your powers, Armsmaster told us, tapping the butt of his weapon on the ground. Every bug within 15 feet of him dropped out of the sky, dead. This was over from the moment you stepped into the room. Miss Militia stepped out of the darkness beside the stage, with what looked like a machine gun in her hands, Regent as her hostage. He didn't have his scepter. Fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Fuck
Taylor coming
indeed.
in with the eloquence.
Yeah. So, any final chapter thoughts other than like all the stuff we've said so far? This chapter's crazy. It's awesome. It's like visually in my mind just a great time.
Yeah, it's very frenetic, but it all hangs together very well. It definitely is very cinematic. It's helped almost by the fact that Gru is here, blanking up big pieces of the room, so you can focus on just what action is important. Like you don't get distracted by any of the other fights that might be happening around. It's you get to just zero in on what's important to Taylor and Gru and Tattletale at this moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. It's very focused.
Mm.
Well, I think it is time. You've got to say it.
Yes. Execute chapter 6.6.
Exactly. So Armsmaster demands that the Undersiders surrender. Gru is equivalent in his rebuttal. No. He points out that they have the Protectorate pretty badly outnumbered, and all the Undersiders are up, but only Armsmaster, Miss Militia, and Velocity aren't foamed to various surfaces.
Yeah. Armsmaster compliments the Undersiders on their excellent tactics, controlling the battlefield, and then using the containment film. But those weapons no longer work. None of your weapons work. Sounds like he has disarmed them. You might say that today he is Disarms Master. Regent is surreptitiously trying to use his power on Armsmaster over and over, but Armsmaster's got the full Magneto helmet going on, blocking out empathic and psychic signals.
I glanced at Tattletale. He was physically shielded against her? How did that work? Then I remembered, when we'd gone up against Glory Girl and Panacea, hadn't Tattletale said she read minds? And now Armsmaster had bad info and was figuring he was immune.
Yeah, Tattletale retorts that she doesn't need to read his mind if she can read all of his teammates. Fair. Armsmaster calls her out for lying, and Tattletale starts a classic Tattletale dialogue, talking through the situation in a way that gives lots of information to her teammates and only further confuses things for her enemies.
This is like her whole deal. She's great at this. She susses out details of how he's working, letting Gru know his darkness won't work, and Skitter know that the electric charge he's using to kill her bugs is coming from the bottom of the halberd. Then she transitions smoothly into telling him, "You'll know I'm telling the truth when I say your team hate your guts." Oh, I thought it was hates for some reason. Hate your guts. They know you care more about rising from your position as the 7th most prominent member of the Protectorate than you do about them or the city.
Yeah, this strikes a nerve. He clobbers Tattletale in the stomach with his grappling hook. Skitter tries to gather bugs. Skitter, you especially do not want to irritate me any more tonight. But Armsmaster kills them with a quick tap of his halberd into the brass-floored tile.
Yep. Regent tries to make a move. Miss Militia drops her gun, but she recovers quickly, kicks his legs out from under him, and rematerializes her power into a machete against his throat. Armsmaster orders Gru to dismiss his power, on the implied threat that if he doesn't, Miss Militia will cut Regent's throat. Really selling the good guy angle here.
Yeah, Armsmaster. Like, the darkness dampens sound, but if I was a civilian and heard him say, like, you better dismiss that darkness or else Miss Militia might, slip up with that machete there. You'd be like, gosh, not really a good guy. Yeah, we get a classic back and forth here that we wanted to include. How about I read Gru's bits and you read Regent's bits?
Okay, yeah.
Somehow, Gru retorted, I'm not seeing a major reason why I should listen.
Got a sword pressing against my neck here, guy, Regent pointed out.
Not seeing a major reason, Gru repeated himself.
Regent let out a little laugh. Fuck you.
Yeah. The exact quote here from Armsmaster is, look at it this way. If there are witnesses, Miss Militia will have a far harder time selling the idea that she stabbed your friend in the throat in self-defense. Gru's darkness rolls back to reveal Bitch and the dogs squaring off against Velocity, and a crowd of people harassed by bugs.
I found Emma in the crowd. Her dad was huddled over both of his daughters, as though he could shield them from any danger, and Emma's mom was hugging her around the shoulders. Somehow, that really pissed me off. And then Greg had written, "Loving parents, my only weakness."
Oh no!
Yeah.
I think especially the thought that Emma has loving parents. Ugh.
Yeah. Fucking Emma.
Fucking Emma. Armsmaster orders Skitter to stop stinging everybody, and she does so with a sigh. She just loves stinging people. She asks to check on Tattletale, worrying that Emma might recognize her voice, but Armsmaster refuses and points his halberd at her.
Yeah. So, Skitter's mind goes into overdrive. My eyes darted in the direction of the crowd, to Tattletale, who didn't look up to talking. All eyes were on the scene. Why had he gone out of his way to get an audience? Could I use it? What had he been so upset about when I met him at the ferry? What had Tattletale gone out of her way to stress to us about Armsmaster? Reputation.
Skitter and Regent spin a yarn together. Skitter starts them off with a statement of concern for Tattletale that is accusatory of Armsmaster crossing the line with use of force. She keeps up the pressure. Please, she was surrendering and you hit her so hard. When he says she's lying, then Regent jumps in with, Tattletale walks up to you, ready to be cuffed, and you smacked her across the room, you fucking lunatic.
Yeah. Somehow, their shenanigans get Armsmaster to order Miss Militia to use a less lethal weapon. It takes like paragraphs of them like fucking around, actually. Armsmaster approaches Skitter, pointing his weapon at her so that she's another hostage. Gru's stuck with two of his teammates being held up by the heroes. Tattletale's kind of finally getting to her feet after taking the big hit from the grappling hook. And then the moment Miss Militia's weapon shifts, Regent springs into action, kicking Miss Militia in the chest and following up by amping it up with his power. He has to roll to the side to avoid by being hit by whatever hors d'oeuvres that Miss Militia had been eating this evening.
Yeah, he really gets her back because just a moment ago he had tried something and then she kicked his legs out and put a machete to his throat, and now he has kicked her back and forced everything up her throat.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, I'm gonna kick your legs.
Ha ha. Actually, I think he kicks her chest, which is sort of a 1-2 punch to get that gag reflex going.
Oh yeah. It says like upper stomach when it says it, I think, in the actual text.
Yeah. Skitter follows up by bringing all the bugs in the room to attack Armsmaster. He readies his halberd to zap the bugs again, but Taylor throws herself under the end before it can strike the floor. As the end of the halberd made contact with my body, it was as though someone had dropped a handful of live snakes onto my chest, and they were writhing in place there, a single tendril rushing up the skin of my right arm and over my fingertips. It didn't hurt much at all. Thanks, Bakata. And hey, it works. Barely any bugs died. Skitter knew Spider Silk was insulated against electricity, but she didn't think it would be that effective. Yeah, I suspect that this probably would hurt quite a lot. But Taylor's just come, away from fighting Bakuda not so long ago with a bomb that literally just lights up all your pain receptors to the max and leaves them open. And this is small beans.
Yeah, for sure. But I think that the reason, like, I think the insulation is super important because I think if she had just body blocked it with her regular body, it probably still would have zapped all the bugs.
Oh yeah, that's true.
But Skitter lapses into caveman speak, as she often does, briefly while she asks Gru to use his power. The electric charge doesn't conduct well through the darkness either, so the bug zapper is ineffective, and Taylor can continue to swarm Armsmaster. Or Skitter. Skitter busts out her classic shove bugs up the nose technique. If he didn't have a mask, Armsmaster would be glad his mask covered the top of his...
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Oops. Sorry, just was reading without thinking there. Telepromptering. Armsmaster should be glad his face, or that his mask covers the top of his face, or he'd be getting the eyeball treatment too.
Yeah, Clockblocker knows how that one goes. Armsmaster is thankfully covered by his helmet here, so he can avoid that fate.
Yeah.
Skitter and Armsmaster head in opposite directions. He manages to get out of the darkness and clear the bugs swarming him, but Skitter finds herself facing off against Velocity. And then Skitter finds herself facing off against Velocity. We'll cover his power in more depth in Powers and World Building, but Taylor described it as being caught in a gale force wind that had every intent of screwing me over.
Yeah, just constantly getting punched. Velocity's moving fast enough that Taylor can't fully swarm him, and any bugs that do land get promptly smooshed. When he tries to push her to a window or knock her to the ground, Skitter realizes that she can't fight against him, so she calls for another blast of darkness from Gru. He's busy helping Bitch keep Armsmaster at bay, but he's able to spare a moment to use his power. And just... whoop.
Yep. Skitter is left blind and deaf, but she has her bugs, and Velocity is noticeably slower. Gru had said that Shadowstalker's powers were somehow less effective in his darkness. Could that apply to Velocity too? Or was it just the extra resistance of Gru's power versus normal air combined with Velocity's low strength? Honestly, I think it's both.
Yeah. Also, I mean, they don't call this out specifically until later, but Gru's power, always has a low key, trump power, so it especially affects, breakers and stops them from working at full strength.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's super good against, Velocity and Shadow Stalker, but it would probably also, semi depower any power, just to a little small degree.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just more obvious with breakers and probably some other things like shakers.
Yeah, yeah. Because the shaker effects are usually kind of field like.
Mm-hmm.
Now that he's slower, Skitter can tag him with a bunch of bugs. Their mere presence slow him down even more. She tries to punch him, but it doesn't do much at all. So I grabbed a weapon he couldn't react to, my pepper spray, and directed a stream of it into his face. Then I instructed the bugs I'd gathered on him to bite and sting. Yeah. Also, we didn't pull out the little thing, and I forgot to mention it, but there is a good moment where she's specifically not biting or stinging yet when they first get on top of him, so that it will be harder for him to find where the bugs are. Pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she gathers her forces and then strikes.
Yeah, yeah. It's more.
Yep, and the effect was immediate and dramatic. You've never really seen someone flip out until you've seen a speedster flip out. I imagine it kind of like watching one of those videos at double speed of someone flipping out, just uh, bouncing all over. And I love it.
Yeah.
It's another great example of the casual humor of the book. Velocity frantically searches for something to wash his eyes out with, slowing down even more so he can have enough strength to check cups and pitchers. Skitter has been keeping better track on her movement this whole time than in any of the previous fights we've seen. She knows that the table he's searching doesn't have anything to help him, and she posts up near one of the other tables he might search. She grabs her baton and swings it up and between his legs, stepping with the motion for maximum effect.
Yep. What male superhero with an expensive costume would go out without a cup, right? Unless the thought crossed my mind as Velocity keeled over, he'd forgone the cup for extra mobility and to reduce friction. I'd find some way to make it up to him after all this was over with.
You know, Taylor, you're just getting a longer and longer list of people you have to make stuff up to. You know, all the heroes you're shoving bugs up into, you just clobbered Velocity.
Yeah.
I don't know. It gets harder and harder when the whole team that you want to join is gonna be like, wow, I remember that time you were just absolutely horrible to me. I have nightmares about that.
Well, even beyond that, it's in this theoretical hero future, it's, she's going up to the mayor I really helped solve the case, and he's like, you bit me!
I still have welts.
Yeah.
My daughter was there.
It's terrible.
Anyways, Velocity, now thoroughly abused, can't resist as Skitter cuffs his left arm and his right leg together, and then his right arm to a table. Velocity was out of action, for all intents and purposes.
Yep. Though every impulse told me to get out of the darkness and get a look at what was going on, I stayed put, crouching and feeling out with my bugs, with their legs and bodies serving as thousands upon thousands of tiny fingers I could use to feel out my surroundings. I got a sense of the situation.
I mean, it's just because we watched it last night, but that Bee and Puppy Cat episode with the guys with lots of little fingers.
We know!
Ew,
our hands are gross!
gross.
Yeah, that was great.
Anyways, Regent's still keeping Miss Militia down. He had one hand outstretched in her direction while she struggled on the floor, dry heaving now, with her limbs twitching. You know, maybe Taylor fits right in. Swarms of bugs, vomiting that doesn't stop. They're really working on that nightmare fuel.
Yeah, they're doing their best. Arms Master. Oh, wait. Vale said, She will make it up to him. Definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm sure.
Armsmaster, despite being surrounded and even more outnumbered than before, is cool and collected. He's got Gru and Bitch in front of him in a bit of a stalemate. The halberd is partially extended into sort of a flail, and when Brutus gets too close, he clobbers the dog. He sort of lets out the chain in a way that just like totally makes it impossible to judge how far it's going to go. And then it's hitting far harder than it looks like it should. Um, so there's probably Tinker Tech making it like extra dense or like have some sort of weird momentum power, which it would make sense to have a weird momentum power because he can scan assault to,
Yeah, I was
incorporate his
wondering.
power.
I was wondering what exactly uh, was going on there, and assault would make a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, He uses the momentum to seamlessly transition to smacking down Gru, then Angelica. Two dogs and Gru. He made it look effortless.
Yeah, he is a menace.
Yeah.
There are a lot of little details we're glossing over, but it's clear from the way he moves and his lack of hesitation in such a dangerous situation that Armsmaster is very confident and effective in a fight. Taylor reflects how Armsmaster, above and beyond other Tinkers, is bullshit.
Yep. Tattletale can tell that this is going south. She uses Judas's charge attempt to try and get out her gun and take hostages, but Armsmaster uses the grappling hook. He hits her hands with the gun with the grappling hook, then tines her in and pole throws her across the room. The dogs and Gru are slowly recovering, but Armsmaster can't pass up an opportunity to grandstand.
Yeah, he's been kind of doing it this whole fight, but here he's like, Rachel Lint, aka Hellhound. And bitch says back, Armsmaster, aka Dickhole. There you go, bitch. Yeah, tell him.
It's the perfect retort, yeah. But Armsmaster starts hitting his halberd against his glove periodically in the next little portion of the conversation to emphasize his points and try and intimidate the Undersiders. He threatens that the dogs may have permanent damage if they continue to fight, and Bitch responds, "You do lasting damage to any of them, we'll find you and do 10 times worse to you. Trust me, old man, they know your smell. We can track you down." Armsmaster can't let her have the last word. He reveals that he's put together software to predict Bitch and her dogs.
Bitch reminds him that she's part of a team, but Armsmaster dismisses the rest of the Undersiders. Your friends? I may not have a simulation set up for him, but I'm better than your leader, Gru. Stronger, better armored, better equipped, better trained. If your friend Regent turns his attention from Miss Militia for more than 20 seconds, she will shoot one or all of you. Not that he could do anything to me if he bothered. Tattletale? Unconscious. Skitter? Not a threat. Wow. Wow, he's going to eat those words.
Yeah, yeah. Vale says Rachel and Lisa collab on a new underground PRT novel, The Adventures of Dick Hole and Glory Hole. Definitely.
Yeah. I could definitely see Tattletale doing something.
Yeah. Skitter, not a threat theme.
Yeah, definitely not a threat.
Oh, Vale.
Why would you think that?
So Skitter thinks that he must be focusing so much on Bitch to better sell his victory to the crowd. If he can force her to give up the fight, it would look better for him because she's the meanest, toughest, most notorious Undersider. Armsmaster may have his simulations, but he clearly hasn't learned a very important lesson. Never get in a pissing match with Bitch.
Yeah. She pulls off her mask, and even in this extreme situation, Taylor can't help but take a moment to think. Her smile, as it spread across her face, wasn't the most attractive. Too many teeth showing. Taylor, come on.
She can't
Well,
help it.
yeah, and then Bitch says, Lung underestimated her, too. She told Armsmaster, looking at me. Armsmaster turned to look as well. Seriously? I mean, really, Bitch? Passing the ball to me? I didn't have a plan. I just really like that line. It's a great line.
Yeah, I think it's great how incredulous she is, but I also like it's another just moment that you can take out. Really, bitch? Uh, so many lines like "bitch," I yelled.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean Taylor also sort of has a point. Like, hey, if I did have something in the works, pulling the attention to me would not be helpful.
yeah, yeah. Um, Bill says, "Never fight a land war in China" was replaced with "Never pick a fight with Skitter" on Earthbet.
Yeah,
Um, Skitter plays it cool though, telling Armsmaster that Velocity has been dealt with, and then denying Armsmaster a follow up by getting another blast of Gru's darkness.
Taylor doesn't have a plan, but she can at least draw Arms Master away from the other Undersiders. She scrambles to get to one of the outside patios. Arms Master follows, casually bringing down Judas along the way. Skinner almost managed to dodge his grappling hook, but almost isn't good enough. When the initial shot misses her, he's able to change the trajectory by moving the chain and catches her at the hook.
Yeah, double whammy. Armsmaster planted his feet and raised his weapon to start reeling me in. No, 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 no! I was not going down like this. Not with Emma fucking Barnes and her asshole lawyer dad in the crowd.
Yeah, that is the most important part. Not your team, not being locked up. It's Emma fucking Barnes.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Skidder wraps the chain around the patio's railing. Armsmaster decides to approach rather than increase the property damage. I don't know. I think it'd be peanuts at this point, but you do you. They have a brief, tense conversation. Skidder, I would have thought you would be quicker to surrender. Nobody else was in earshot. Whatever side I'm on, I don't exactly want to go to jail. Look, my offer stands. I've almost got the last bit of detail I want from these guys.
I need from these guys even.
Oh yeah,
Um,
need from these guys.
I think that possibly she misjudges why he walks over. I think there's a chance that he walks over um, so that he can say this to her and try and get her to like convince the group to stop fighting or something like that. You know what I
Mm,
mean? Like he's making a tiny social gambit on this person that he knows has like weird mixed allegiances.
yeah, that could be it.
Yeah, I don't think he cares about the property, frankly.
Yeah, this is a guy we've seen like stapling lung to the sidewalk.
Yeah.
He doesn't seem to matter. The property damage does not seem to figure too strongly in his calculations.
Yeah.
And again, it's the situation where they've already just done so much damage to this place. Like any additional damage will be chalked up to the Undersiders anyways.
Mm-hmm. So, Skitter appeals to his reputation. She's close to getting the intel needed on the Undersider's boss, and the only way he can avoid looking incompetent when the Undersiders get away tonight is if he did it all deliberately. Part of the plan. But Armsmaster isn't interested.
No, he answered me. No. Don't expect anything other than a prompt arrest for you and your companions for your antics tonight. He shook his head. A bird in the hand, after all.
Yeah, and then he prepares to bind her to the thing. Do you want to read the next section, or should I?
You go for it.
I took a deep breath. You were right, Armsmaster. Of course, he spoke absently, pushing me against the railing with one hand. An impartial paragraph skip. This was over from the moment we stepped into the room, I finished. Nearly 700 hornets exploded from underneath my panels of armor, all latching onto him, biting and stinging relentlessly, flowing underneath his visor into his helmet, his nose, mouth, and ears. Some even crawled down beneath his collar to his shoulders and chest.
Ah, yeah, the old hornets under the armor trick.
It's the oldest trick in the book. That's why you hear about it so often.
And now they're under his armor. Ha ha!
Yes.
Once more, Skitter throws herself under the halberd to absorb the charge before Armsmaster's bug zapper can go off. With one hand, he lifted me and the halberd both. Armsmaster be swole. The electricity and having the butt end of the halberd slammed into her repeatedly is awful, but rescue arrives just in time. The Undersiders are riding the dogs over the edge of the patio. Armsmaster is bumped on the way, and Skitter takes the chance to wrench the halberd out of his hand and toss it over the edge.
Yep. Skitter catches Gru's hand as he passes on Judas, and they're out. Gru banishes his darkness as they leave, so everybody can see just how badly they've trounced the Protectorate. Also, Vale says, the problem with combat analytics software is it works after a thing happens for the first time. Yep.
Yeah, and even then, I mean, I work in finance, and an adage that everyone knows in finance is past performance is not an indicator of future returns, which is to say, just because things have worked a certain way beforehand doesn't mean they're going to continue doing so in the future. And if you rely upon that, well, the worst that happens in finance is you lose a bunch of money. The worst that happens here is you get fucking clobbered. Like, you die, you go to prison. So, well, for Armsmaster, probably just get clobbered. But still, like, relying upon that too strongly is a way to lose at some point.
Right. Yeah. We're here.
Yes. We see how the timing was so good. Taylor used her bugs to draw on the wall inside. She drew some arrows to the patio and the words, "Let's go," communicating to her team as she dealt with Armsmaster.
Yep. I wrapped my arms around Gru, holding him tight, as much in anticipation of our landing on a nearby rooftop as a farewell hug. Chances were good that this was my last job as part of the Undersiders. Dun dun dun!
Ooh, yeah.
Boom.
Vale says, "Wait, what? Past performance is always an indicator of future returns. That's what my bank says." Yeah. You should trust them. They definitely
have your best interest at heart.
They know what they're talking about.
Yep. You can always trust the bank.
Yes.
Oh, man. Oh, no, I did it to myself. I got that Neil Breen line stuck in my head. I resign as president of the bank.
Yeah, he relied too much on past performance.
Exactly.
Anyways, yeah, thoughts about this chapter, or these chapters even? I at least found these to be really exciting fight chapters. I think that the action is very well paced. We get some very great dramatic moments. The battle sort of surges in both directions very nicely. We get to see both some outstanding things from the heroes. Armsmaster especially is trying to show off both his chops as a fighter and how much of a dickhole he is. I like it.
Yeah, I think that it really, like, their plan is so creative. When I read this for listened for the first time, and they like use the containment foam, like that was so. It's such a cool like plan and turnaround and everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's neat.
Yeah, we'll probably talk about the plan more during the audience participation, so I'll save any thoughts until then.
Yeah, I think we're good on that then. We should move to the characters. I kind of wanted to talk about a few of their costumes, the ones who we're pretty much seeing for the first time. So we got like Triumph had a gladiator/lion theme to his costume with a gold lion helm, shoulder pads, and a belt, and a skin tight suit elsewhere.
I mean, I guess if you're gonna train and be all muscle, those skin tight suits.
Yeah. I mean, he also has like powered muscles on top of everything else. So.
He's got that comic book physique.
Oh, Bill said, yeah, using the foam against them is what makes the whole thing possible. Love that. And then we got Velocity. You want to read that costume?
Yeah, Velocity in his red costume with the racing stripes down either side, and two stripes meeting in a V at his chest. Wasn't that far from her. I suspected that they had been squaring off. Okay.
Yeah, that was about bitch.
Yeah, Velocity. I mean, he he doesn't get that much attention towards his costume in this chapter, but we do get to see he sort of has a bit of a flash thing going on. The red and like stripes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In their universe, the Flash exists as a character. So,
Hmm.
yep, worth noting. Let's think. Who else do we sort of see? I think everybody else we've seen them before, so we don't get like a big description of their costume, except we saw Battery at the mall, but like we get to see Battery actually like fight, so the like lines on the costume change from like cobalt blue to white. I have a sneaking suspicion like Battery doesn't need to activate the light thing, and probably like a background technique she could use in a long enough fight is like stop activating it when they get used to the pattern of like activation of light and then like charge dismissal.
Yeah, that's one of the things. Again, think about prediction algorithms is that you can sort of train them to respond a certain way, or people in this case. They see you do it over and over, and they're like, "Ah, it works this way." And then you pull the old switch, like, "Nope, I don't have to do that after all." Bang.
Yeah, I feel like I can't think of a lot of examples in Worm, but I can think of a really good one in Ward where there's like kind of a intentional building of rhythm in a fight by a character, and then they break that rhythm because they make it seem as though they have to fight like that, and then they're just like nope. And like that's how they get in the guard of the person they're fighting.
Nice.
So yeah.
Yeah, and we put this one under the power building and knowledge, but this is sort of a costume as well, really, for the PRT troopers.
Hmm. Oh yeah,
You
I
want to read
had
it?
pulled this out when I was when I had written my little bit of the chapter, not realizing you had it down here, but their very recognizable uniforms were chain mesh augmented with Kevlar, topped with faceless helmets. The only means you had to identify them were the badge numbers printed across their vests in bold white numbers. Yeah. And then they've got their containment foam sprayers as well that look like flamethrowers.
Yep. I don't know. I was sort of interested in this because it's an interesting direction to take this uniform.
It basically makes
Uh,
them more like capes. They're like standardized capes.
yeah, I mean, I suppose that's true. My thought was sort of that the capes are all they have their identities hidden, right, for the most part.
Hmm.
If I was to set up an organization to be like, okay, we have sort of the human side of this, my inclination as like a PR move would be like, okay, we're going to be more open and transparent as a contrast to the heroes. But I suppose your way does make sense too in a way where
They're kind of
they're
leaning
just saying,
in.
yeah, they're doubling down on the theme.
Yeah. Um, and I think it's like double duty. One, it's good like actual protective gear, but then two, um, they they basically with their kit and with their training, they're like a cape with really bad powers. Like a standardized uniform like base model cape. But
Hmm.
at the same time, they're still like a mile above what a normal human would be like in a fight because they have training, they have like gear that actually does enough to like stop a lot of powers. Um,
Yeah, and importantly, they have non-lethal weapons that are far more effective than the ones we have in the real world, which is, you know, good.
yeah, well, they really can't start like you can't just point a gun at a cape because that cape will go from like I don't know, flamethrowing around you and like kind of trying not to kill you to just now you are a cinder or ash on the ground.
Yeah, when the other side necessarily has lethal powers, you want to make certain not to escalate to that point necessarily.
Yeah, because of the like existing nature of the game and so forth, which is like an understood concept even in normal society. Like they don't all think of it as the cops and robbers thing, but they all understand the baseline like like some of the unwritten rules kind of stuff, and so that kind of spills over. And
Yeah,
yeah,
it's full on crazy ex-girlfriend. You're grappling, grunting, and someone pulls out a knife, and you're like, oh, whoa, whoa, slow down.
exactly. What were you? I don't know. I wasn't thinking. I said I wasn't thinking. Yeah, that seems amazing. Um, oh, Vale says there would be a lot more death without it. Yep. 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 Yep.
Yeah, and I think it was probably a priority to develop these measures, largely because killing a bunch of capes is counter to the good of society overall in ways that we'll see later on in the story.
Yep. Do you want to read this whole?
Yeah, we got a whole block about the containment film, which is sort of important to read because it is so central to how both the PRT squads work, and it also gets used by the Protectorate some as well. I'd watched the Discovery Channel feature on this stuff. The PRT, the Parahuman Response Team, was equipped with Tinker-designed non-lethal weaponry to subdue supervillains. This containment foam was standard issue. It ejaculated as a fluid. Sorry, it ejected as a fluid. Oh
Oh,
gosh, I'm sorry.
Greg.
I'm so sorry. Oh god. It ejected as a fluid and expanded into a sticky foam. You can see where I got that from. I'm sorry. With a few handy properties. It was flexible, and it was porous when fully expanded, for one thing. So you could breathe while contained within it, at least long enough for rescue teams with a dissolving agent to get to you. It also was impact resistant, so PRT squads could coat the ground with it to save falling individuals, or keep heavy hitters from doing much damage. The way it expanded, you could coat all but the strongest villains with it, and it would disable them. Because of the way it denied you leverage and was resistant to impacts and tearing, even the likes of Lung would have trouble pulling themselves free. Topping it off, it was resistant to high temperatures and a strong insulator, so it served to handle the the pyrokinetics, and those with electromagnetic powers.
Yeah. Vale says, "What is
Oh
this show
no.
rated? NC-17 plus 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 confirmed." I did specifically before the first episode set the setting that this show is not intended for children. So there you go. NC Infinity. You have to be infinity years old to watch. Uh, yeah, but containment foam's crazy. They we don't end up seeing it as much as I expected to see it when we're first introduced to it. But
Yeah, it's one of those things that seems like it would be so useful that it would be everywhere, right?
yeah, but I mean, like, there are reasons that are sort of expounded upon at different times for like why that isn't the case. Like how long it takes to clean up after, and like how expensive it is, and just stuff like that.
Sure. Yeah.
I would also guess
Um,
that there's a limited total amount of it.
that's my thought as well, actually, is the main thing there is that it requires a tinker to jumpstart the process of making it essentially. So they
Mm-hmm.
don't have access to enough to just like equip all the ordinary police with it, for example.
Right, right, yeah. Um, but we'll run into it a bunch. We'll talk about it when we do. It's interesting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Triumph. I don't have anything written down about his power, but I'm gonna wing it. He's got some minor perk powers, like some baseline super strength and like swollenness, and he can do sonic shouts that can like punch through concrete. He can also clearly do them much weaker to not have like such a concussive force, but it like started fucking with Taylor's sense of balance like instantly. Her ears were ringing. She could like hardly stand. Um, so there's seemingly decent range that he can do, on top of being like a ranged brute, which is pretty fucking cool power if you ask me. Um, I
Yeah,
mean,
he's nothing extraordinary, but he
mhm.
does have like just a solid set of powers, right? He
Yeah,
will you can imagine the sort of niche he'd fit into on a team, and he's not going to be like an all-star, but for what he is, yeah, solid.
yeah. I mean, I think also the fact that like his attacks are It's like how sonic damage is unblockable in a lot of video games and tabletop games and stuff. His attacks are very hard to stop because they are literally just sound in the air. So,
Yeah, I mean, like even getting behind a barrier, you'll dampen it, but it won't necessarily stop a lot of the like knock-on effects like dizziness or causing your ears to ring, loss of balance.
yeah.
Yeah, very useful.
So, pretty dope. And if you want to jump into Battery.
Yeah, Battery, we get to see her actually in action rather than just a description of how her power works. She gets to charge up and then go zinging off with a lot of speed and a decent amount of power. And I'll sort of just lump her together with Assault in this section because he's
Mm-hmm.
right below, anyways. They have a really good synergy going on because Assault can manipulate kinetic energy, so she can use some of her charge to give him a bunch of energy to work with, essentially. Just go zinging to him, then bounce off someplace else, and now he's also moving fast. So you get to have a sort of 1-2 Assault and Battery coming at you every time she charges up.
Yeah, and he
Um,
can keep up a constant assault while she just hits like bam,
haha.
bam, bam in the like opportunities. So I feel like the two of them against one opponent would be like an incredibly effective team for the same obvious reasons because um I think she can hit harder than he can, but it's just like she doesn't have as much of an opportunity to sustain something like he can cover that weakness for her.
Yeah, she has the highs and the lows, but he is a consistent DPS, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. Pretty
Yeah, and you
cool.
can see as well that they execute their like teamwork instantly once the darkness is down. They are already on the same wavelength, and they just immediately go for it. No communication needed. So we get the immediate sense that they have worked together quite a lot. They've got this down to a T.
Mm-hmm. And then Miss Militia, her power we've seen before in different scenes, but so far I don't think we've ever seen her like fire off her power, which is kind of funny.
No, yeah, she. I mean, to be fair, her power is on the rather lethal end for the most part. She can use rubber bullets, but like even so, the fact that her power manifests as a seemingly lethal weapon means that I imagine she's rather hesitant to use it casually. Um,
Yeah, I figure she could probably make some incredibly low grade weapons, and I don't know, like I don't know, a shitty version of maybe
it
it
pulls out
can't
the
do stuff that's
airsoft.
not lethal enough, basically. I just thought of that. Maybe it like rubber bullets are the smallest scale it can go, or maybe it can only use like existing gun models or something. But
Maybe it's very flexible. Like we see her do a machete in this chapter, so it's pretty clear
hmm
that she has a fairly wide range of weaponry available to her. But it is not clear, certainly, what the exact outer limits of that is.
yeah, we know from later chapters that she can do really cool tricks like fire off a whole magazine of ammo or clip or whatever the fuck, and then like auto reload by reforming the gun with ammunition full. And if she gets any jams in a weapon, she just auto reforms the gun. Um, stuff like that. So like
Hmm.
she can fight actually really big threats in some ways. Like let's say that a big mech attacked Brockton Bay, like it was walking in over the water. She could fire an endless stream of like Stinger missiles at it, just over and over, or like a guided missile of some kind. Um, she could just like rocket after rocket after rocket. So like that's pretty. She her upper limits are high, I think.
Yeah, the question we were having though is what is her lower limit really?
Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah. Yeah. Lower limits, unclear.
hmm.
And then
All
Arms
right,
Man.
yeah, Arms Master. We get to see him really go into town this chapter. He at least at one point stands off against basically the entire group of the Undersiders. Is like, nah, taking you down. Dog grew, no sweat.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably There's probably a lot of capes that can kind of do that, but like it's very impressive because he's just doing it with like martial weapons. They are like obviously incredibly advanced tinker weapons, but they're still hand-to-hand combat weapons. Whereas like most of the capes who can do this sort of thing, it's like Alexandria's supermaning around punching people with mega strength, or like Legend is ultra flying and shooting infinity lasers. He's just like, no, I have this like flail basically.
Sure, but I think it's important to note that the number of parahumans that can just sort of stand and take on an entire opposing team, there aren't that many of them, really. You
Yeah,
mentioned a couple of the big names, and there are some others who definitely can just be like, nope,
yeah, and
me
that's
against an entire team.
part of what I'm saying is just that like all the other ones are like so like overwhelmingly powerful, and he just like has basically a human body, and
Hmm.
like that's part of what's so cool about it, I think.
Yeah, we do get Tattletale dishing some of the details on his power, that he can miniaturize and optimize Tinker gear to fit into a smaller space, which lets him just jam pack his equipment with all sorts of goodies.
Mm-hmm. And it's not just the strength of his tech either. I think it also has to do with his like he has a good instinct for how to fight different powers even beyond like having a program or whatever. Like he is we see him in other stuff and like flashbacks and whatever, like he is smart at fighting capes, you know?
Yeah, I mean, he's also been doing this for a while. He's had a lot of experience fighting capes, working as a tinker, getting to see all the different effects, having access to the PRT's pretty good resource program for tinkers, especially ones that are as good as he is.
Mm-hmm. And the fact that he's been like active for 15 years, it's not just to show that like he has all that experience. It's like he has all that experience and he's not dead.
Yeah, not dead, not maimed, still upright,
Yeah,
being a dickhole.
being a dickhole. And then velocity, we'll read a big chunk on velocity here. Velocity, in contrast to battery, was more like Shadow Stalker. He changed states. And while I had no idea what this meant exactly, whether it was him shifting partially into another dimension, or altering the way time or physics worked in relation to himself, I did know that it made him able to move very fast without needing to rest like Battery did. Fast enough that my wasps couldn't really land on him, and those that did were dispatched before they could start stinging. Uh, the drawback, though, was that while he was moving like that, he wasn't hitting as hard, probably for the same reasons he wasn't shattering his bones by hammering his feet against the ground 10 times a second, getting torn to shreds by friction, or running out of oxygen due to an inability to breathe. His speed came with a reduced ability to affect the world around him and be affected by it. He couldn't hit as hard, couldn't hold or move things easily, an effective loss of strength proportionate to how fast he was capable of moving. His perceptions were ramped up too, which meant he had the luxury of what must have been seconds in his own senses to see my reactions, calculate the best place to stick that next punch or kick to knock me off balance or inflict pain. It was less like being in a fist fight and more like being caught in a gale force wind that had every intent of screwing me over. We didn't pull it
Yeah.
out here, but she does mention that he punches as hard as an 8-year-old.
Wow. Taylor, she's getting hit by this guy, but she is hitting back with some shade. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, this is a very cool power. Wildbow mentions that, especially in reference to battery as well, that these sort of like speedster powers tend to come with uh some sort of drawback. I don't suppose drawback's not the right word. Some limitation to prevent themselves from being torn up by moving through the world so fast. Because, as she mentions, like, yeah, you hit the ground so fast with your feet, they're gonna fall off. You go fast enough, it's gonna be hard to breathe. Things like that. And we see Battery sort of here, his power bringing that compensation in the fact that he sort of becomes disconnected from the world in a way while he's moving this fast.
Yeah, exactly. Um, The Velocity's power is like cool as shit. It explains away a lot of stuff, like why doesn't the Flash just walk up to people and like scramble their brains? That wouldn't be something that Velocity's power set would be capable of. Um, and it also, yeah, it addresses a lot of the questions around like the Flash, like how does the Flash just not instantly start fires when he's running around, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know the answer to that question. How does the Flash's costume stay together? Uh, all sorts.
Well, because otherwise we'd have to increase the rating on the program.
Oh yes, yes, yes. Um, then let's think. Anything else about Velocity? Oh yeah, Speedster flip out, classic moment. Cannot be understated how great of a comedy beat that is. Um, yeah. What else? Do you have anything else you want to say about Velocity before we scoot on?
Just that I sort of like the description of how fighting him is less like actually fighting a person and just sort of a force is pushing against you. And there's not much you can do about it, right? Not directly. You can't really effectively hit him. So you sort of have to either weather it or use some other exotic effect to shut him down.
Yeah, yeah. I think that there's probably. I just thought of like a silly scenario of like an air based person just like blowing him away.
Yeah, Kazliki Bay or something like that, just being like whoosh, and he
Yeah,
goes flying.
and he'd have to wait in the state so that when he hit the ground it wouldn't be bad. So he would just have to sort of drift back, I think. Hilarious
Yeah.
stuff. Um
I guess we don't know like how fine control he has over speeding up and slowing down. So he could like release it for a bit, and then when he gets closer to the ground, speed up again.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well, do you want to talk about Gru a bit? You put him down as opposed to the other
Yeah.
Undercities.
I well, yeah, we have a lot of other people who sort of like show up, but I think Gru here we get to see how his power can really be used in a situation with a lot of pieces on the board.
Yeah. He can
Because
really cut things down.
his power is both useful in terms of controlling the battlefield, and then also because it has this effect on a lot of powers like velocities above, it is extremely useful for shutting down certain parahuman opposition. Because it gets used against Velocity, it gets used against Shadow Stalker, it gets used against Armsmaster to stop his Bug Zapper. It's a pretty widely variable tool that is super useful. And I
Yeah.
know we didn't ask for MVPs for this fight, but I think if we had, Gru would be my MVP.
Well, I'm gonna possibly do that as an additional question at the end of the fight, writ large, like because it's kind of a 4 chapter fight, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, so at that point, I'll do that. Maybe it's only 3 chapters. I can't quite remember, but it does spill over.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Wow, spoilers.
spoilies. And then for Gru as well, I just think that like we don't see it here, but we already know that he can block radio signals, so like that can be really useful, and like we'll actually get to see that in the story, and so yeah, there's a lot of stuff. Gru rules. Um,
Yep. Then we have a bunch of other people who sort of show up but don't do that much. Shadow Stalker like can get out of containment foam. We have a bunch of the wards and Glory Girl who we don't see very much of because they get foamed early on.
so I thought about this. I thought that Glory Girl's force field would give her normally a better way to escape the containment foam because I think it would slide off the force field and not stick to it. Probably. But then I realized that her force field pretty much works on her body and her costume because like is tied to her cape identity.
Mm-hmm.
So if she's wearing something that isn't close enough to the shape of her costume, then possibly like it caught on that and then from there just formed a full bubble around her.
Yeah, she's wearing like a dress or something like that, and those things tend to have a bit more shape to them than her costume would, I think.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I imagine that's why she's mired down.
because otherwise, I think that she could just, unless she was fully encased on all sides, I don't think that the containment foam would stick to her. Um,
Hmm.
Vale says she might have been foamed before she got the FF up. Also, true, true. Um, I think it's pretty quick activation though. Generally.
Yep.
And
Welcome back, Vale.
yes, welcome back, Vale. Was AFK for a while, but I just left it
Mm-hmm.
rolling. But yeah, are there? We don't even see Gallant do anything. He doesn't even get
Nope.
mentioned that he's phoned. He's just there.
Yeah,
Like
clock blocker too. I think just he's
Cl-
there. Hi.
Clockblocker gets hit by Gru specifically, and then like Glory Girl is Tattletale specifically. Gallant, we don't even need to know.
He is just not an important person.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna be real. Like his sensory power is pretty good, but his like shooty power seems like it's bad. Like just
I
not
mean,
powerful at all.
I think it depends on who you hit it with. You have to be judicious. Like, don't hit bitch with it. You're not going to have the right sort of calibration to do the right things to her.
Yeah.
But
And I
there
know that
has
he
to
can
be
like
some
layer the
people.
effects. It's just that like, you know, if I was to choose any one of those four wards or whatever, like and Glory Girl, like anyone standing there to fight, I'd fight Gallant. Like
Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah. So
No question.
yeah. And then let's see here. Beep beep beep. I think that's everybody because everybody else we kind of talked about. Because we know Rachel's power, we know Tattletale's power, all that stuff. I think it
Yeah,
is.
I didn't include Skitter or Tattletale or Bitch because I think that while we see Taylor really
Oh,
flexing her powers here, she doesn't do too much that's like really novel here. Just she's more refined in what she's doing.
I will say two honorable mentions: Regent making Miss Militia puke,
Hmm.
and also Skitter's writing on the wall.
Oh yeah, the writing on the wall. You're right. Yeah, I'd even even pull that out in the chapter description. Yes, yes, that's a very neat trick. Being able to communicate to her team or anyone really over distance, even when there's a bunch of cruise darkness around or a bunch of intervening terrain. It's a very useful tool in her toolkit.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean it's like the first iteration of what will become her communication through bugs that essentially lets her um talk to the range of her like bug control. So it's pretty
Yeah,
good.
although I have to say, like having bugs spell out some words feels less creepy than having like a chorus of bugs chittering out words. Um, like it's hard to imagine exactly what that would sound like, but I can't imagine it sounding very.
It's like
Uh,
if you played Gloomhaven and your friends were all harrowers.
yeah, it's inherently creepy.
Yeah. Vale says if this was written in 2022, would she have written Poggers? This is an important question. Yeah, I mean, she probably just would have shouted "Pog" at the top of her lungs. Yeah,
Hmm. Yeah, this whole heist was very Pockies,
exactly.
and they all would have said so.
Yeah. Um. Now to the audience participation question. Talk about the effect on the chapters of skipping the planning scene and jumping straight into the action. And I'm gonna start with Vale's answer from the thing.
Go for it.
Um, It makes us feel like the team is just in business as usual mode. We know from the bank scene they only take a few hours to plan even complex jobs and are more a plan a bit how we'll wing it group. This jump to action confirms that expectation while showing how dangerous the lack of planning can be. It's quite a nice decision to write this way.
Yeah, I know. for, like Scott from We've Got Worm doesn't like this sort of style typically, but I actually think it's pretty good as long as it's used somewhat sparingly, because it can give you a very Deus Ex Machina feel when our heroes pull out surprises that help them. Right, that can be a problem narratively when it happens.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Uh, but on the other hand, a meticulous planning session, especially for a job that's going to go relatively well, is both redundant and a bit boring, to be honest. You want
Mm-hmm.
to you want to save some of those surprises so that they can be interesting to the audience when they crop up. And as
Yeah.
long as you aren't pulling anything that is like very surprising for the characters out, like if Gru manifested a new power mid-fight that let him do X, Y, and Z, that would be very disturbing. But like I said, for all the Undersetters, these powers are all basically what they've shown before, just a bit refined as they get to work together better.
Yeah.
I suppose the I suppose the only thing I'd point out as being uh a bit of that thing in this would be the containment foam, which I think may have been mentioned before, but we hadn't seen what it did before. And so it being included as an element here is a surprise for the audience. But it's done so early on in the chapters, I don't think it's a problem, anyways, because we get to understand, oh, this is what this is and what it does, and then imagine how it will be used in the fight going forward as we see it playing out on the page.
Yeah, and it feels much more like a standard cape power reveal, as we'll see in like later fights when she fights various people that she's less familiar with, where like you'll kind of see them do something new and you might learn some tattletale background that she had shared with them before the fight, but she kind of has to like just learn about it on the fly. In this case, like we learn about it on the fly, but but they
Mhm.
knew, kind of thing. And it makes sense that they would know too, because it's very common in their world.
Yeah, Vale says the only big reveals, number one, containment foam subversion. Yeah, where they know what it does and they know that it's going to be there and they have planned to turn it on the heroes. Yeah, that part of the plan is a big sort of like windfall in the direction of our protagonists. But again, like I think that happens early enough on that it doesn't really hit too badly in terms of feeling like the hand of the author uh, giving our heroes freebies. And then Taylor's knowledge of all the heroes, both as Evan as part of their plan, wing it, and it works just fine. Yeah, I mean, we've seen Taylor already being a bit of a capes geek, and then Tattletale having the sort of inside knowledge. So that to me was not really very surprising at all. Just, I think it's pretty easy to expect that if they're a like PRT hero, sorry, a protectorate hero,
Yeah.
that the Undersiders will have the down low on them.
One of the more surprising things is that there are no um, non Brockton Bay capes there. That could have really screwed them over because they'd be fighting somebody that they didn't know how to deal with, basically. And, like,
Yeah,
their plan is kind of catch all, but there are a lot of capes that, like, containment foam and their current suite of powers would just not really deal with.
Yeah, I think we mentioned that last week in the chat that if they'd had somebody visiting, especially like a big hitter or someone, yeah, this plan would fail to account for, and this would be a beat of Tattletale being like, "Oops, there's way more heroes here than I expected." Then this could have really gone off the rails. It was very
Yeah.
close to going off the rails, anyways, to be honest. But
Uh,
they managed to pull it through.
Yeah, I can even think of, like, not like heavy hitters, but like minor characters who have powers who would like fuck up this particular plan. Like what's his name? Cash. Power not like amazingly strong. You can sort of step into a pocket dimension, but I think he could do it in such a way that he could like fully get out of containment foam without a big problem. And then like I don't know, he'd just be one more person skulking around like kicking their ass.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, or there's a lot of like strangers or breakers or shakers that just like if they were present would be big trouble.
yeah. Vale
Um,
says by revealing in scene, we don't have to see the exposition slash planning. It's great if
yeah,
they.
that's sort of
Mhm.
sorry. Mind if I pause on that for a second?
Yeah,
I just want to say, yeah, I definitely agree with that. That's like I said, if you do the planning and then you do the action, it's sort of redundant because you're seeing the same things twice, especially if the plan is going essentially how they planned it out.
Yeah.
And the exposition is just a less interesting version of doing it. So you may as well just do it.
Right, right. And I mean another version of this that makes that work when they do that is when things go off the rails like right away.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you we're going to invade this base and here's the path we're going to take. But right when they get in the first room, then things go sideways and then they have to find an alternate route. Like that's a thing that happens in a parahuman story. So yeah, that's like an alternate path because like you guys had said also, we don't want to get stale always just jumping right into it. We want to use this in scenes like this where it's very appropriate. So
Yeah, just vary it up. Anyways, go on.
yeah, Vale had next said, if they landed and it was a top secret surprise birthday party for Armsmaster with every high end leader in the country, that would be a tattletale moment. Um, she's not that bad. um, and then Vale had said, if you plan, then do action, the action can't match the plan. Exactly, yep, yep. If you just do action and reveal the plan as you go, the plan can work more as expected. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, and there's like multi ways to do it. You can even like jump back and forth between the planning scene and then show the doing scenes in like movies and stuff. That's really effective. You can have them like voiceover talking over the plan and then it keeps cutting to the time period where it's actually happening. And that can be pretty sick.
Yep. Yeah, I know that that's also a design thing that like Frank Trollman likes a lot in RPGs. If you're going to do some sort of heist, you can't have them plan it all beforehand because that'll be very boring for the players. So whenever something comes up, you can step aside and hey, here's the planning flashback, and you get to have your folks plan out their actions here, and then it feels all very good when they react to it in the spot. Yeah.
Yep, yep. Um And then, do you have any more to say on that audience participation question? Because I think I am mostly talked out on it.
Yep, I think I'm good.
All right, so the question for once we've read chapters 6.7 and 6.8 are, should the Undersiders join their boss's organization now that they know who it is? I didn't know
Yes,
if
and
that was too
who's
much of a reveal question, but I thought, no, it's fine.
yes, and who is the MVP of the fight, and why is it Gru?
Yes, yes, that is also the sub question. Who is the MVP of the arc fight? And I mean, I think I'm trying not to just pick Gru over and over again, but I think that he's like so phenomenal. Um, then again, Skitter's
Yeah,
pretty great in this fight.
he doesn't get played up quite so much, but I really think that he is an essential glue that holds the team together in terms of the fights.
MV Pizza. Um, Vale, you broke my brain. MV Pizza is Captain Containment Foam. Oh yeah, okay.
I mean,
Um,
yeah,
mhm.
he swoops in and just foams everything.
uh, we'll have to see how we feel after next chapter though too, because Rachel is also fully the getaway. It's the entrance and the exit.
That's true.
So we'll see. All right. Well, I am gonna read out the links before I start the music because I have overrun myself several times. Um, we've got the music in this episode, and continuing on in this arc from this point, we'll have the. And I think I've been pronouncing it wrong. CO.AG music is I think how they like to say it. So CO.AG music on the move from the documentary music series. And then we've got our Discord server link in the description of the stream, as well as in the channel description. The author of the work being discussed here can be supported on Patreon at patreon.com/wildbow. The full text of the work is available for free online at parahumans.wordpress.com, and there is the full fan-made audiobook at audioworm.rain-online.org. And starting up the music, saying goodbye to Vale and reading final comments here, so as to leave nothing on the table. Rachel, Regent, Skitter, Gru all play huge roles. Tattletale had the planning. It's real team event, but I stand by my surprise ally containment foam MVP. Well, we shall discuss that next week, Vale.
Indeed.
Take care all, as Vale says, and I agree. Take care all. Thank you, Greg, for being on the stream.
My pleasure as always.
Bye, bye, bye.
Later.